Hey, Dad. Happy anniversary.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
A little bit early, but...
well, tomorrow's your anniversary.
That's right.
And it's a big one.
Number 50.
50.
That's pretty amazing considering I'm only 45 years old, huh?
Yeah. So it's...
How do we do that?
It's... Yeah, and I just turned 47.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, wait a minute.
Yeah. So... All right, so I thought this month we dedicate it all to marriage stuff.
Okay.
Since you're pretty much an expert on it at this point, right?
Well, I've got a lot. I'm experienced. Let me put it that way.
So I thought we'd kick off this month with this specific episode talking about after 50 years of marriage, what have you learned?
Okay, so this is going to be a long podcast, right? Well, actually, not.
That's why we have the whole month. Yeah.
Actually, if it's stuff I've learned, it's going to be pretty short. If we were talking about mistakes, we could go on forever.
Say stuff you've learned the hard way.
Yeah, we can put it that way. So
so I mean, it's 50 years of marriage. Obviously, I've watched most of it.
Yeah,
and it's been interesting.
Well, your outsider's perspective is going to be a lot different than this insider's perspective on what it was like.
Yeah.
Let me start off. Because you had mentioned you'd like to talk about this sometime, so I went and I asked your mom. I thought, well, I'd like to get her perspective on it. What are some things she's learned? I thought, get a whole list and add hers into mine. And so I said, so 50 years of marriage, what have you learned? And here was her response. What advice would you give somebody? Learn to cry out to God. And your mom's not a joker, so I thought, okay, I'm not sure if that's good advice. Well, it is good advice, but it kind of gives you a little insight into what our relationship was like early on and even sometimes still today.
That reminds me of somebody else told me that the first few years of their marriage, their favorite Bible verse was, I die daily.
Yeah. Well, we've had our first years, were like really difficult. And in fact, our first half of the 50 years were pretty difficult.
You mean
struggles.
Like 25 years of it?
Yeah, like 25 years of it. I remember, though, reading I got a book somebody gave me when we were just dating, and he talked about the first 20 years are just warm-up. And I thought, oh, okay. So, I kept hoping that after 20 years it was going to get better. It did. I mean, it did. It was
I was going to say, how do you define better?
Better, yeah.
Because, yeah. I'm not that far into this. I'm 18 years into this, right? But I found that marriage is only healthy as much as you're willing to contend and kind of wrestle with issues with your spouse. So getting better to me is almost more willingness to wrestle with issues, even if it looks a little bit tense at the start. Yeah. That's my Enneagram 8 take on marriage.
Yeah. Well, our relationship was, it was not a bunnies and unicorns. We're always in agreement and sweet things like that. A lot of hearts and roses and stuff. It was really rather gritty and difficult. And part of that had to do with the fact that we were married so young. I mean, we were both very immature. We were married we thought we were waiting a long time, because we started dating when we were 19. And so we were going to wait till we were 20 years old and mature to get married, And I look back on it and I go, man, we weren't even mature enough to be driving a car, let alone getting married. What were we doing, All
right, but let me talk about that, because a lot of people these days are complaining people are waiting too long to get married, and then they've got their life and they've got their ideals and they've got their thing. And I understand that. I mean, I didn't get married till I was 29. Yeah. A lot of people thought I'd never get married because they're like, you're just impossible. You're impossible.
Well, that's what the dating apps told you, wasn't it?
Yeah. I got rejected by eHarmony. They basically said you're impossible. But I think about that. But so there's this element of you're never truly ready for marriage.
Oh, yeah.
So just jump into it. But there's also the element of you can do a lot of damage to each other if you don't have some maturity and growth and a little,
And we definitely did. We did do a lot of damage, and that's why it took a lot of healing and things. It is wonderful now. I mean, I can't imagine life without your mom right now. Unfortunately, we're getting to a point in time where one of us is going to have life without the other, unless we go down in the plane together or something. So there's some things I have learned though.
Like that thought.
That's a sad thought, but. It's another sad thought, her trying to live without me or me trying to live without her, because I realize so many things that
you get
I do for her.
You get so used to having each other in your life. It's like, man, a part of you goes, and you see that a lot of times. After a spouse goes, somebody goes usually pretty quickly.
No more reason to life for many folks, yeah. So,
Do you think that's healthy?
No, I don't. I don't think it's healthy. I think, but because again, your whole life, again, this sounds so spiritual all the time, but I mean, your life needs to, first of all, be focused around the Lord. And so, like, if your mom were to pass, I'd say, okay, Lord, Paul said it's better to be single. What can I do? How can I serve you more fully now? And I mean, there'd be grief. I mean, there would be a huge part of me missing. But the God of all comfort comforts you in all your afflictions so that you can comfort others. So that would be a ministry that I would have then that I couldn't do now. So, yeah, no, I don't think it's healthy that you are so clinging and dependent on each other that your life ends if the other person ends. Now, if God ever died, then that's good. Your life could end, but your life needs to be focused around Him rather than around your spouse. And so, and I think your mom and I both keep that as the priority. But there's a lot of things we have learned through the difficulty. I remember we had some friends who they had one of those kind of homogeneous marriages, and I remember they'd been married 8 or 10 years.
What does that mean?
Well, by that it means they both were pretty much the same. And right. I talked to him one time, and they were talking. I
call those vanilla marriages. It's oh yeah, oh you're so wonderful, you're so wonderful
exactly.
too. Oh yeah.
And it's just that homogenized. They're both pretty much the same, vanilla. And I remember them saying, "Oh yeah, we really don't have any arguments." And I thought, man, that would be so sweet. But then later I thought about it. I thought, man, if your mom and I both saw the world from the same perspective and agreed on everything, in a way it'd be a good boring. But I wouldn't have, there's so much that I have developed by seeing things from a different perspective and seeing things, even though it was hard and even though I disagreed and even though I resisted and fought, which was a lot of what caused it. A lot of ours just had to do with, not that we were young, but we really were both immature and we came from totally different backgrounds. I came from a loud, physical contact family in the Midwest. She came from an emotional contact family, just her and her sister, small family. My dad was kind of a working guy out there, came home dirty, covered in oil and dirt every day. Her dad worked in an office. We just came from, she just had one sister. I only had one brother. My sisters were much younger than me, so I never really had to relate to a sister. She never really had to relate to a brother. And so we came into marriage just totally ignorant. And nobody told us. We didn't get any premarital counseling. Nobody sat down and said, hey, have you thought these things through? Our pastor knew we were getting married. He was a good friend of her dad's, but he never offered counseling. I don't know if that wasn't a thing back then or... Yeah. We just had nobody to sit down and talk us through it and help us understand things.
That's interesting because one of the things I've seen about people from your generation... You people.
We gutted it out. We were the great generation.
Well, a lot of it, when Emily and I were like about to get married, I remember having so many people coming up to me and going, oh, we're so excited about your marriage. It's going to be the most difficult, hard struggle. It's going to be a battle. You're going to want to die some days and you're just going to think your life's over. But we're so happy for you. We saw people giving advice like that left and right to people that were, in our situation. Goodness. And I thought, what's the deal? But do you think a lot of people from your generation went in deluded or they went in, like, why are they so bitter about it when they're telling us about it? Or are they afraid we would? And so what I've seen consequently is a lot of people of my generation go, oh, I don't want that because they've said things and they're like, it's so great. It's like having kids. Oh my gosh, you're never going to sleep again, but it's wonderful.
Yeah.
What? Like, do you think that's part?
Well, and I don't even know, frankly, how much good premarital counseling does. I don't know because I didn't experience it. And I've often wondered when I've done it a few times, which I try to avoid it because I don't like it. When I've done it a few times, it's like, these guys, they're just looking through such rose-colored glasses. I don't care what they tell them. Go, oh, that's you, but not us. We're just deeply in love, and it's all going to be roses. I think maybe what they were trying to do is prepare you ahead of time So here's the thing. I know like when the first argument happens in marriage, it's the tendency is to think, if you're immature and like we were anyway, tend to think, oh, I married the wrong person. Oh, because you have this idea that it's all going to be bunnies and rainbows.
Yeah.
And so when you do hit a disagreement, you can think, oh, it's the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. Unless you realize that, okay, this is part of it. It's part of it. And if that catches you totally off guard, it can really knock you for a loop. So maybe that was the reason they'd give you that.
Yeah, one of my mentors told me that one time. He said, don't ever marry somebody until you've had an almost breakup or a breakup fight because you got to see how they how they respond in conflict.
Well, your mom and I were engaged for a year, and we had a lot of those breakup fights. In fact, we decided we would not announce that we had broken up until we'd been broken up for 3 weeks. Because
you never told me that. I didn't know that.
You're going to learn so many things. Yeah, so we decided, okay, we're going to be on again, off again if we do this. So let's not tell anybody, because we'd break up for a week or a month, or then we'd be back together again, And it was just like, I mean, we were really the dysfunctional couple. If I had been counseling us, I'd have said, you guys need to just separate and give it a few years. And then if you even like each other after that, then try it again, But again, we didn't have any counsel. We didn't have anybody inputting into our lives. And so we were just kind of stumbling along in the dark, trying to figure it out on our own,
Yeah. So we're already like way into this podcast. I think the thing you're saying is incompatibility doesn't necessarily mean you can't keep a marriage together.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to say. In conclusion, I guess we're concluding here, is the fact that, look, if you're struggling, let me guarantee you, there are some things that I think we did right that made it possible for us to stay together.
What are those?
We were compatible. Well, the number one thing is we were tightly connected with the body of Christ. And I'll tell you the story, because this sounds all, well, you mean every time we went to church, every time the doors were open, we were there. And at that point in time, we had Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. And then special meetings. We were there. And it wasn't because I was on staff, because I wasn't. I was still in the Navy. But that was just who we both were. And, growing up, it wasn't a matter of, well, we're going to church today. Yeah. Well, is the church open? Yeah, then we're going.
Yeah, we were there all the time.
All the time. In fact, we might go to 2 churches. When we were on the mission field, we knew missionaries who didn't go to church because they were in ministry. And I thought, well, what's that got to do with it? I'm in ministry too, but we went to church. In fact, 2 churches usually.
We did.
A Spanish one,
and then
English one.
And then Sunday night too.
And then every time, again, that was just, now you say, oh, that's just legalism. No, here's what it did practically. We didn't see it like legalism, but we saw it as, look, the family of God is gathering. We're part of the family of God. Why aren't we going to be there? But I remember one time specifically, Sunday afternoon, we had an argument. That wasn't too unusual in those early days, but it was Sunday night. So we're going to go to church. This is before you guys were born. So we get in the car. We don't talk to each other the whole way. We sit down. We put on our smiles. And during the message, and I don't know, it may have been about tithing. I don't know what it was about. It could have been second coming of Christ. I don't know. But I knew you're sitting under the influence of the Word and the Spirit. God is dealing with my heart. I have no idea what the preacher was saying, but I know what the Spirit was saying to me. He was saying, you need to apologize. Yeah, but God, it wasn't all my fault. It doesn't matter what's your fault and what's not. You can apologize for your part. All right. And I'm grumbling with God. But I just coming under this heavy conviction. And it's because if we'd been sitting at home, that wouldn't have been happening.
Watching TV.
Yeah. Or whatever. Arguing is what we would have been doing, So in the middle of the message, I reach out my hand and I take her hand and I start to cry thinking about this. And I look her in the eyes. I say, I mouth, I'm sorry. And as I recall, she looked back at me and said, you should be. But the point is, I realized that argument could have gone on for weeks and months to where we didn't even remember what we were arguing about. We were just mad at each other, and it could have built up. But we sat under the influence of the Word and under the influence of the Spirit, and it put an end to that right there. And I realized I don't know how often that happened, but that specific time I remember just being in fellowship, sitting under the influence of the Word and the influence of the Spirit to where God can speak to you and convict you about. And you realize when God's speaking to you, it doesn't matter what she did. You're accountable to Him for what you did. And then, she can work that out with the Lord on her own. But that, I would say, stay tightly connected with the body of Christ is the one major thing that allowed us to stay together for 50 years.
Thanks for listening. Please consider sharing this with your friends on the platform of your choice. For more from Joël Malm, visit joelmalm.com. For more from Rick Malm, visit rickmalm.com. Our podcast music was produced by Alex Burleson.